Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I was a long time ago as a student, and you said we've been together 30 years, so now you have more or less my age, which is something I didn't want to reveal. Anyway, jokes apart, it's a pleasure here. It's a quite challenging thing to try to spot 5 topics of competition law in 10 minutes to privacy lawyers. I will just enrich all these ground of contradictions that Caio pointed out, while singling other contradictions with competition law. Just for instance, I know that privacy, in my ridiculous knowledge of data protection law, but I usually thought about the GDPR as a system to protect the data. Well, now when we look at competition law, it's just the opposite. It wants to share the data. We have, for instance, merger control procedures in which the main aspect when 2 entities merge is whether they combined an enormous amount of data, which is an asset. For competition law, data is an asset, valuable, economic valuable, and it's not there just to protect consumers. It's to obtain an economic value out of that data. So when you combine 2 companies with enormous amounts of data, they have an economic asset, which might be a competitive advantage. Is it going to refrain other competitors from having access to that data? Is there enough data of users in the market? I just put you an example. This is dissertations, but when Facebook acquired, for instance, WhatsApp, one of the questions was, what if WhatsApp starts with advertisement? Well, you know that WhatsApp is not financed with advertisement. It has not advertisement itself, okay? But the Commission, the European Commission said, well, what would it happen? Would there still be enough data of users in the market so that Google or whoever else can get that data and enrich their services? And the answer was, yes, there is enough data in the market, not proprietary of Facebook. The same when Google bought Fitbit, or when you have Microsoft acquiring LinkedIn. The main concern is that large entities monopolize the data. That's the full thing. When we look at artificial intelligence and all the debates that we have now at the European Commission about competition and privacy and data, is always the same. Who is going to monopolize this asset, which is essential in order to feed the algorithms? We need to feed artificial intelligence with data. We don't want to monopolize data. So just my first, let's say, contrast or maybe contradictory issue is this different approach. Sharing data versus protecting data. For competition law, data is an active asset, an important asset to be shared. And then I will just drop into a couple of topics I've read, and for me as a competition lawyer, are simply, well, astonishing because they use competition terms in a different way that we do. And I'm going to start with things like dominant position, essential facilities, for instance, and well, I know it's a hot topic nowadays, this pay or okay consent issue. It also has competition law implications. So the first thing, and I pose myself, because I didn't want to bore you with doctrinal things, so I pose myself 8 questions. I will not go through all of them. You will kill me. You can kick me out. But just my first question, because I read several opinions. One of the EDPB, for instance, is when you have an imbalance of position, then whatever you do is wrong because there's no freedom of consent, everything is abusive. Well, from a competition law perspective, that is not correct. One thing is that you have imbalance of positions, another thing is that you have a dominant position. It has nothing to do. Dominant position is a legal term established by the European Court of Justice. We have even guidance of the European Commission establishing the criteria for setting what is a dominant position. And it's not simply that I'm big and fat. Sorry, excuse me, I just simplified. It's not a set of thresholds of, you have I don't know how many users. It's not even the concept of a gatekeeper. Let me make this clear. The Digital Markets Act, the DMA, is not competition law in itself. It's not Article 102. We have 2 tools in antitrust. Article 101 of the treaty, which is agreements on restrictive practices. Article 102, which is abuses of dominant position. And then we have the DMA. What is that animal? That animal is not a sanctioning system, it's a preventive system, ex ante. Why was it adopted? Because the Commission did not have the time to go into long investigations against Google and alike to demonstrate that they have dominant position. It was so difficult and so long that they decided to issue an ex-ante provision saying, you cannot do this, and this. I don't need to prove you are dominant. I just simply don't allow you. So being named a gatekeeper is not the same as being dominant. If you infringe the DMA, it doesn't mean you're committing necessarily an abuse of dominant position. They're two different kind of rules, although both of them are applied by the European Commission. So just to make clear, dominance is not the same as having different bargaining position. Dominance is a specific legal term, and it's quite difficult to prove dominance. And the third one is not the same as a gatekeeper. Now we go a step further. And I've seen a lot of debate about the pay or okay case. And, well, one might think, because you are dominant, imagine you're dominant, does it mean that you cannot ask for a subscription model? Well, the answer from a competition perspective, strictly competition perspective, is no. Even if you're dominant, it doesn't mean that per se the system is abusive. If you look at the Bundeskartellamt decision, it also recognizes it. It says, the fact that you are dominant doesn't mean that you cannot obtain free consent. It is one of the elements to be considered, but it's not equivalent that you are dominant, and because you are dominant, you can never obtain a valid consent. How many of you have negotiated your contract with the supplier of the water, or, I don't know, or the light at your house, or whatever? I haven't done it. I don't have bargaining power at all. But it doesn't mean that I didn't give my consent. If I don't like this supplier, I will go to another one. By the way, I don't use Facebook. So I'm one of these few people who believes that Facebook or any social network is not an essential facility, and I'm still alive, okay? I'm simply saying this up front. So just go backwards. From a competition perspective, and the European Court of Justice has acknowledged it, you can be dominant and you can have a subscription model. Per se, they are not incompatible. What it might be problematic is the amount of the fee. Because under competition law, all companies, even dominant, are entitled to charge a fee for their services. Nobody, even if it's dominant, is asked to work for free. Who is thinking that in what we believe that is a free system in a social network, we're not paying? We're paying with our data. We're paying in kind. Always paying, of course. The service is paid in kind. Now, if you don't have the data, you'll have to pay some in a different way, because this is an economic business system. Competition law is not there to regulate business models, only to stop abusive conduct. And it's not abusive to charge a fee for your work, for your service. If you go to the ruling of the Bundeskartellamt, which in fact relates precisely to a case in which a company was supposed to be dominant, well, in one of the paragraphs I've written, but I will not repeat it, it says, okay, either you obtain consent or, if appropriate, you can, well, have a system without, as it's called, behavioral advertisement or whatever, for a fee, for a reasonable fee. So the fact that you charge a fee for a system which does not use behavioral ads is admitted by the court for a dominant company. So I don't think we need too much debate on that. Next step. And I remember yesterday night, this is too late, yeah?
No, the next, and then we move
okay.
to
the last one. I didn't look at her because I knew she was going to say, cut off, cut off, cut off.
No, it was fine.
So last one, I'm happy to discuss after the coffee. I was asked yesterday in the evening, so what is the price? What is the right price for a subscription fee? Well, competition authorities and competition law is not there to tell you what the price is. Well, they can tell you what the price cannot be. So it's a negative test. And this negative test only applies when there's blatant misalignment and is blatantly, let's say, absurd, and extraordinarily excessive the price. I put you an example in the Liadian case. It was, the price was increased by 1,000 times without changing the product. Well, what's the reason for that? So you say, well, you have to compare costs and income, and there's the margin. Well, it's one of the criteria, but not the only one. Even if you have high margins, the European Commission has said is valid. It's not a question of margins. You have to look at comparable products. You have to look at economic value of the products. And comparable products is not only matching your direct competitor, you can match and look at other competitors and similar products. So I would look at, I don't know, Netflix or other products, and they charge probably more. So I think that we're going to simplified concepts using competition law provisions that do not apply here. And this is at least the way I see it. Can a dominant company put abusive prices? Yes, but it's quite difficult to demonstrate. Okay? And if you have similar products with similar prices, you don't have a clear case.